They say one should feel comfortable in the skin they're in.
I didn't realize it was practicing. I took the night shift because nobody else wanted it. County animal control. Mostly raccoons and addicts, dogs that bit mailmen, the occasional dead deer on the side of the highway. The call came in just after 10:30 p.m. Dog acting aggressive, not ours, won't leave the porch. Remote property, tree line on 3 sides, dirt driveway. The woman on the phone sounded calm in a way that felt rehearsed. "It looks like our lab," she said, "but it isn't." I figured she meant a stray that resembled theirs. I drove out. The house sat alone under a pale wash of moonlight. No streetlights, just woods pressing in on all sides. The porch light was on. The woman and her husband were standing inside the doorway, not outside. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Most people meet you halfway. They stayed behind the screen door. "It's still there," the husband said quietly. I followed his gaze. The dog was sitting at the edge of the porch steps. Black lab, healthy coat, good weight, perfect posture. Too perfect. It wasn't panting. Its mouth was closed. Its chest wasn't moving. It was just sitting, facing the house, not looking at me, looking at them. I stepped forward slowly, leash pole in hand. "Hey, buddy." It turned its head toward me. The movement was smooth, controlled. Its eyes were wrong. Not glowing, not dramatic. Just focused in a way that felt human. Assessing. I've handled aggressive dogs before. You can see the tension in their shoulders, the twitch before they lunge. This one didn't tense. It just stood up and walked toward me. No sound from its paws, no shift in its breathing. When it reached the base of the steps, it stopped. It looked up at me. Then it opened its mouth, not to bark, to speak. The sound that came out wasn't a growl. It was a wet, layered whisper, like multiple voices trying to push through a throat that didn't belong to them. "Don't." That's all it said. Don't. The woman behind the screen door made a small noise. I didn't move. I told myself I didn't hear that. Stress, wind, audio pareidolia. I extended the pole slowly. The loop slipped over its head easily, too easily. It didn't resist, didn't snap, didn't pull. It let me tighten the catch around its neck. And then it smiled. Dogs don't smile like that. Its lips pulled back too far, too high, exposing gums that stretched longer than they should have, teeth that didn't match the jaw. As I tightened my grip, I felt something through the pole. Not muscle tension, something shifting, under the skin, like hands pressing outward from inside. The dog's spine began to rise, not arch, rise, segment by segment. Its legs elongated with quiet, deliberate pops. The leash pole bent in my hands. The head stayed the same, still lab-shaped, still black fur, still those eyes. But the body beneath it was unfolding, standing upright. The fur thinned as the skin stretched, and beneath it, there were impressions. Faces, not fully formed, just shallow pushes against the surface, like something wearing skin that didn't fit. The woman inside the house whispered, "That's not our dog." The thing tilted its head, and this time, when it spoke, it used her voice. "We know." Plural. Its jaw unhinged wider than bone should allow. Not to bite, to open. And inside its mouth, there were more teeth. Not layered like a shark. Arranged. Neatly. Human. I dropped the pole. It didn't fall. It caught it midair. With hands. Hands that pushed through the fur like someone forcing their fingers through wet fabric. Long. Jointed wrong. It examined the pole with curiosity, then looked back at me. "You came alone," it said. My voice. I stepped backward. It stepped forward. Mirroring. Its legs were too long now. Knees bending slightly inward. Head still that of a dog. Body wrong. Inside the house, the husband was crying quietly. The thing's skin began to sag. Not melting. Loosening. The lab shape collapsed downward as something taller pressed upward beneath it. It was shedding. Peeling itself open carefully. Like someone removing a costume. Underneath, there was another shape. Thin. Gray. Featureless except for a mouth that kept trying to form words. Testing. Practicing. "You don't look like him," it said. Like it was disappointed. I don't remember reaching my truck. I remember the sound. Bones reconfiguring. Skin tearing softly. And behind me, my own voice calling out. Wait. When I looked back once, just once, it was wearing me. Not perfectly. The proportions were slightly off. Arms too long. Smile too wide. But close enough. Close enough that if someone else drove up, they'd think I was still standing there, talking to the homeowners. I quit the next day. Didn't give notice. They said someone else found the lab in the woods the next morning. Dead. Skin intact. Completely empty. No organs. No blood. Like something had tried it on and decided it wasn't right. I don't answer unknown numbers anymore. Because twice now, when I let it go to voicemail, I've heard myself speaking on the other end. Practicing. Getting the tone right. Waiting until it fits. He made it home. I missed the recital. Again. The call came in 10 minutes before I was supposed to leave work. Transformer blown near the county line. If it wasn't fixed before the storm rolled in, half the valley would lose power. That's what I told myself while I drove past the school parking lot, already empty. By the time I finished the repair, it was close to 11. My wife had texted earlier. She kept looking for you. I told her I'd make it up to our daughter this weekend. Ice cream, movie, something easy. I took the back road home. Less traffic, no streetlights, just trees pressing close on either side of the asphalt. Halfway through the stretch near Miller's Creek, something stood in the road ahead. At first, I thought it was a deer, tall, lean, but it was upright, balanced on its hind legs with a steadiness that felt practiced. My headlights caught its face. It looked directly at me. No panic, no confusion, awareness. I slowed. It tilted its head slightly, as if comparing me to something it already knew. Then it stepped off the road and disappeared into the trees. I kept driving. I've always kept driving. When things get complicated at home, I work overtime. When conversations start drifting toward feelings, I find something to fix. I tell myself I'm providing, that it's enough. My phone buzzed as I turned onto our gravel driveway. My wife. "You're home?" she asked. "I just pulled in." There was a pause. "You're already inside." I looked at the house. The kitchen light was on. I could see movement through the window. A man stood at the sink. Broad shoulders, work jacket, my jacket. He turned slightly, and I saw my profile in the glass. My wife's voice came back through the phone, small and uncertain. "You're washing your hands." The figure in the kitchen laughed softly. It was my laugh, lighter than I usually let it be. I hung up. The man inside dried his hands carefully. He moved through the kitchen with an ease I recognized but rarely felt. My daughter ran into the room. She launched herself at him. He caught her cleanly, lifted her, held her close. He bent his head to listen while she spoke. Really listened. I stood outside and watched myself do everything I meant to do but postponed. The door opened before I reached it. He stepped out onto the porch. Up close, the resemblance was exact. Same scar along the chin from a high school baseball game, same tired crease at the corner of the eyes. But there was a steadiness in him I'd never cultivated. He looked at me the way someone studies a blueprint. "You're late," he said. His voice carried no accusation, just fact. "You can't just walk in there," I said. "I already did." Behind him, through the doorway, I saw my daughter setting 2 bowls on the table. She glanced toward the porch. "Dad?" The word hung between us. He didn't look back. "She doesn't mind," he said quietly. "She just wants someone who shows up." Something shifted beneath his skin then, a subtle tightening, like muscle settling into place. For a moment, I thought about charging him, dragging him away from the door, forcing him back into whatever tree line he crawled out of. But what would I be fighting? He hadn't threatened them. He hadn't harmed anyone. He had stepped into an absence I created. He leaned closer, close enough that I could see the faint reflection of myself in his pupils. "You don't disappear all at once," he said. "You practice." A flicker passed across his face. For a heartbeat, the features loosened. The jaw sagged slightly. The skin around the eyes thinned, revealing something gray and stretched beneath. Then it settled again. My face returned. He stepped past me, walked down the porch steps, moved toward the driveway, toward my truck. I watched him go. Inside the house, my daughter called again. "Dad?" I turned. She stood in the kitchen doorway, confused but smiling, waiting. I stepped inside. The house felt the same. Same hum of the refrigerator, same faint smell of detergent. She hugged me. There was a pause, a small hesitation as she pressed her cheek against my chest. Then she relaxed. I held her. I stayed there longer than I usually would. At dinner, I listened. I asked questions. I watched her hands move while she talked about the recital. My wife studied me with quiet curiosity. Later, when the house settled and everyone was asleep, I stood in the bathroom and looked at my reflection. The scar on my chin, the crease at my eyes, my face. Behind me, in the mirror's depth, something adjusted its posture to match mine. A fraction of a second too slow. I didn't turn around. I raised my hand. The reflection raised its. We held it there, perfectly aligned, except for the eyes. They were steadier than mine, more certain, as if they knew something I was only beginning to understand. I lowered my hand. The reflection followed. When I finally turned off the light, I caught a glimpse of movement in the dark glass. The posture corrected. The smile softened. Practicing. And for the first time, I couldn't tell whether it was learning to be me or I was learning to be it. The night was thick with heat as I walked the deserted trail back to the cabin, the lantern swinging by my side. My role was simple. I was a hunter, though not a particularly successful one. I was out there because the others had decided I needed to earn my place among them. They had grown tired of my excuses, of my failures, and I could feel their disappointment heavy on my shoulders. My knee ached from an old injury that never healed right, a constant reminder of my inadequacies. But it wasn't just the knee. Something deeper gnawed at me, an old guilt I carried like a stone in my chest. I had left my brother when he needed me most. In his final days, I avoided his calls, too wrapped up in my own life, too afraid to face his mortality. The trail ahead was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds, and I felt that same darkness inside me, a void I could not escape. The night air was still, save for the distant call of an owl, and the rustling leaves whispered secrets I tried not to hear. It was then that I noticed the first sign, a faint rustle where there shouldn't be one. I froze, lantern held high, the light casting long shadows that danced among the trees. A shiver of unease crept up my spine. There it was again, a low growl, unmistakably real and far too close. It was as if the forest itself had exhaled a presence, something that watched with intent. I told myself it was a trick of the mind, but deep down, I knew I was not alone. I continued, each step deliberate and quiet. My heart beat like a drum in the silence, and the night pressed in, the air growing heavy with expectation. The sound of footsteps echoed mine, mimicking my pace, a taunting mirror of my own movements. I stopped, listening, and they stopped too. This was no animal. It was something else, something that knew me. I tried to shake off the tension, rationalizing it as the work of nerves and fatigue. But the woods were alive with whispers I couldn't ignore, pressing against the flaw I tried to hide. I glanced around, the lantern's light revealing nothing but shadows. My mind fought against the recognition that some things could not be explained away. I could no longer deny it. I had to confront whatever followed. The choice tore at me, the cowardice of my past urging retreat. But I pushed forward, lantern raised like a talisman against the creeping dread. I would face this thing, if only to prove I wasn't the failure they all thought I was. The path twisted, leading me deeper into the woods, and every instinct screamed to turn back. But I moved on, driven by a need to uncover what haunted these woods, and perhaps to prove something to myself. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that cuts through bone, and I felt eyes upon me, measuring my every move. Then it appeared ahead, stepping into the light. It wore my brother's face, his features twisted, yet familiar. My breath caught. This was no chance encounter. It had chosen this visage deliberately, mocking me with the one person I had failed the most. It smiled, and I saw the cruelty in its eyes, an intelligence that understood the weight of my guilt. It began to speak, its voice a distorted echo of my brother's, recounting the moments I had missed, the calls I had ignored. Each word was a knife, carving into the guilt I carried, and I felt myself unraveling. This creature, whatever it was, knew my deepest shame and wielded it with precision. I stumbled back, the lantern light flickering as I fought to maintain control. The world tilted, and I realized this was what it wanted: to break me, to see me crumble beneath the weight of my own failings. But something inside me resisted, a fragment of resolve that refused to be extinguished. With a shaking hand, I held the lantern high, the glass warm against my skin. I could not outrun this thing, nor could I hide from its gaze. Instead, I confronted what I had become, the shadows of my past, and I made a choice. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. The creature laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the trees, but I did not waver. I held its gaze, refusing to look away. And in that moment, the air seemed to shift. The darkness receded, just a fraction, enough to breathe. I turned and walked away, the path back to the cabin clearer now, the weight of my guilt still present, but somehow lighter. The woods were silent again, and as I reached the clearing, I paused, looking back. The darkness watched, but did not follow, and I knew it would always be there, a reminder of what I had faced. The lantern's light flickered one last time before I lowered it, the warmth lingering on my hand. I carried the scar of that night within me, a testament to the choices made and the burdens carried. The night was still, and in its silence, I found a semblance of peace. The sun had dipped below the ridgeline, leaving the desert awash in shadows and the chill of coming night. I was there, as I had been many nights before, a shepherd without sheep, an old man too stubborn to leave the land that had ceased to give. I tended the remnants of my father's farm, though there was nothing left to harvest but memories and guilt. I had sent my family away, to the city, to a better life, far from the whispers of the land and its empty promises. Yet I stayed, tied to this place by the threads of my own failings, unable to admit the truth of what I'd lost. The wind whistled through the broken slats of the barn, a mournful tune that matched my mood. I sat on the porch, a bottle of whiskey my only company, and watched as the first stars blinked into view. The coyotes howled in the distance, a familiar song that once brought comfort, but now only served to remind me of my solitude. It was then I noticed it, the outline of a figure standing at the edge of the barren field, too still to be an animal, too silent to be a neighbor. I squinted into the twilight, the bottle forgotten in my hand. The figure remained, its presence unsettling, like a shadow that refused to fade with the dying light. My heart beat a little faster, each thump a reminder of the stories my grandmother used to tell. Stories of skinwalkers, creatures that wore the skins of others, lurking in the periphery of our lives. I shook my head, tried to dispel the old tales, but the figure remained, unmoving, a stain on the horizon of my thoughts. I rose, the chair scraping against the worn wood of the porch, my legs unsteady beneath me. I told myself it was a trick of the light, an illusion born of whiskey and lonely nights. But deep down, I knew. I had ignored the signs before, and it had cost me. It was time to confront the ghost that haunted my land, the specter of my own failure that had driven my family away. I took a step toward the field, the cold of the earth biting through my thin boots. The figure shifted then, a slow, deliberate movement that sent a shiver down my spine. It turned, and I saw my own face staring back at me, twisted by shadows, eyes void and empty. My heart raced, a drumbeat of fear and recognition. It was no mere apparition. The creature wore my skin, my very soul, a mockery of the man I once was. I staggered back, the weight of the realization pressing down on me. The tales were true. The Skinwalker knew me, knew my weakness, my guilt. It had come to wear me down, to take what little remained of the man I had been. I hesitated, caught between disbelief and the undeniable truth reflected in its eyes. Could I face the very thing I had become, a hollow echo of myself? The wind picked up, a cold gust that seemed to push me forward. I had run long enough, hidden behind the facade of duty and denial. I took another step, then another, until I stood at the edge of the field. The creature watched, unblinking, as if daring me to continue. It was then I understood. It was not here to take me, but to offer a choice. I could feel my hands tremble as I met its gaze, the whiskey bottle slipping from my grip to shatter at my feet. The smell of alcohol mingled with the dust, a bitter reminder of the life I had chosen. The Skinwalker tilted its head, a mirror of my own contemplation. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my decision. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs, and stepped into the field. The ground was firm beneath my feet, each step a testament to my resolve. The creature watched, silent as I approached, until the space between us disappeared, and I saw the truth in its eyes. It was not a monster, but a reflection of my own making, the lie I had lived with for too long. I reached out, my hand brushing the fabric of its worn shirt, and I felt the barrier between us dissolve. The creature smiled, a faint echo of my own, as if acknowledging the choice I had made. I had come to face myself, to reclaim the parts I had lost. The Skinwalker nodded, a silent understanding passing between us, and then it was gone, leaving only the quiet of the night and the stars above. I stood there for a long time, the wind whispering through the grass, carrying away the last remnants of fear. I had faced the darkness within me and emerged, not unscathed, but whole. As I turned back toward the house, I caught my reflection in the broken glass of the whiskey bottle. The face looking back was my own, lined with age but clear-eyed, unburdened by the past. The night was still, the coyotes silent, as I walked back to the porch. I sank into the chair, the wood creaking beneath my weight, and watched as the dawn slowly chased away the shadows, its light spilling across the land. The Skinwalker had left its mark, but I was no longer afraid. I was free, not from the land, but from myself. And as the first bird sang its morning song, I knew I would be ready to start anew. The desert stretched out before me, a canvas of ochre and pain, and I walked it with a purpose I did not entirely understand. I was a ranger, tasked with safeguarding this stark, desolate land from those who might harm it, or be harmed by it. My partner John had been missing for 3 days, and it was unlike him not to send word. Responsibility weighed on my shoulders like the sun above, an unbearable heat that turned my shirt damp with sweat. I had to find him, though, truth be told, I was not eager to do so. The night before, a chill wind had swept in, carrying with it a whisper of something old and malicious. I had heard tales of the Skinwalkers, but tales were for the campfires, not for men of duty like me. Yet, as I walked, I felt a prickling on the back of my neck, a sensation that made me think of John's face, his laughter, always so full of life, and how it had left me feeling cold. I had avoided him for a while, burdened by the guilt of that avoidance. I had known his family troubles, and yet had failed to reach out. Maybe this was why I was here now, with the sun setting and the sky bleeding, to find what I had turned away from. The silence was broken by a sound, faint and unsettling, like the rustling of leaves where there were none. My heart lurched, and I clutched my rifle tighter, scanning the horizon. Nothing but shadows stretched long across the sand. I told myself it was the wind, but deep down, I knew something was watching. Something that understood my flaw better than I did. Earlier, as I had set out, the tremor of doubt had been easy to suppress, but now it clawed at my insides. With each step, the violation of my senses grew stronger, the world around me closing in with a suffocating intent. I argued with myself, reasoning that fear was not a guide, that it was nothing more than my mind playing tricks. A trickster, like the stories say. Yet, the rational part of me could not drown out the deeper instinct that something was terribly wrong, and I was at its center. I paused, considering my options, the weight of decision heavy upon me. Was it madness to think the tales might be true? That John might have fallen victim to the very legends we dismissed? My feet, driven by desperation, moved forward on their own accord, my mind following reluctantly. I would confront this thing, whatever it was, for there was no other way. I had to know, even if the knowing meant peeling back the layers of my own cowardice. The night descended swiftly, and with it, a darkness that was more than the absence of light. I could feel eyes upon me, studying, and in that moment, I understood that I was not merely an intruder in its world. I was its quarry, a mirror held to my own failings. As if in response to this revelation, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette that mimicked the way I stood, the way I breathed. It was me, and yet it was not. The realization struck me with a force that was almost physical. This thing, this phantom of the desert, knew me. It knew my silence, my guilt, and it fed on it. No longer was it content to merely haunt me. Now it sought to replace me, to be me, and I felt the chill of its understanding seep into my very bones. My heart raced against the inevitable tide of fear, and I knew that to falter here would mean surrender. I had to choose, to act, before it took more than I was willing to give. I raised my rifle, the metal cool against my cheek, a final defiance against the encroaching darkness. But my finger hesitated on the trigger, the weight of my flaw dragging it down. In that moment, I made my choice. I lowered the weapon, threw it to the ground, and stepped forward, hands open. It was not an act of surrender, but one of acceptance. I had to face what I had avoided, to offer myself up to the truth. The creature regarded me, its eyes reflecting a knowing that was both alien and intimately familiar. And then, it was gone. The desert breathed a sigh, the wind carrying with it a sense of finality. I stood alone beneath the vast, indifferent sky, the silence once again complete. But the scar remained, a wound carved deep in the fabric of my being, a reminder of the night I was forced to confront myself in the guise of another. I turned back toward the distant lights of home, the sand shifting beneath my boots. I carried the weight of the desert with me, a burden that was both heavy and light, and the knowledge that the real battle had always been within me. The night was calm when I arrived at the cabin. I'd come to hunt, a pastime handed down from my father and his father before him. The mountains stretched vast and silent, their peaks hidden in the darkness. There was a certain peace in the isolation. The firewood was damp though, and it took longer than I liked to get a proper flame going. With the fire sputtering, I stepped outside to take in the night. The air was crisp, and I could hear the distant rush of the river, a sound that lulled and comforted. All seemed as it should, save for the eerie stillness in the woods that pressed close to the clearing. An owl called in the distance, its cry sounding off, as if it didn't belong. I chalked it up to the whispering winds that often played tricks on the mind. It had been a long day's trek, and the mind often wandered when there was nothing else to occupy it. I returned to the fire and settled in, the warmth taking the edge off the chill that crept in with the night. The wood cracked in the flames, sending embers into the air. As the firelight flickered against the cabin walls, I noticed a movement at the edge of the clearing. Just the rustle of leaves, I assured myself. A deer, perhaps, or the wind shifting the branches. I listened closely, but all was quiet again. The night deepened. I found myself staring into the fire, eyes heavy, when a sound like soft footsteps caught my attention. It was faint, barely perceptible, but enough to set the hairs on my neck crawling. I shifted, trying to catch sight of anything moving in the shadows. "There's nothing there," I whispered to myself. "Just a trick of the dark, the mind playing its nocturnal games." I forced a laugh, though it fell flat in the solitude. The fire was low now, and I added more wood, watching as the flames leapt and danced again. The footsteps came again, clearer now, circling the clearing. I stood, straining to hear, to see anything in the thickening dark. My rifle lay within reach, a comforting presence, though I felt foolish for even considering it. There was nothing there, only the night and its endless shadows. But the feeling wouldn't leave, a sense of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the firelight. The footsteps stopped, then started again, always just at the periphery of sight and sound. My heart beat faster, a rhythm in tune with the fire's pulse. I shifted closer to the cabin door, the solid wood a reassurance against the unseen. The wind picked up, and the footsteps faded, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the crackle of the fire. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, a hunter's nerves stretched thin. Yet the unease lingered, a shadow of doubt that wouldn't lift. The firelight seemed dimmer now, the night pressing in, heavier, more oppressive. I felt as though the forest itself was watching, waiting for something I couldn't comprehend. The cabin felt different when I stepped inside, the air cooler, as if something had slipped in unnoticed. I bolted the door behind me, the sound too loud in the quiet. The lantern cast a pool of light that only served to deepen the shadows around me. Sleep was elusive, my mind replaying the sounds, the hints of movement that had seemed so real. I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, the silence around me pressing close. Rest was impossible. The unease settled in my bones like a cold I couldn't shake. Hours passed, the night stretching long and unending. At some point, exhaustion took me, and I drifted to a restless sleep. Dreams came, filled with the shadows of the forest and the whisper of unseen steps. Morning light found its way through the window, pale and gray. I awoke with a start, the remnants of the night's unease still clinging to me. Outside, the world was unchanged, the forest a silent sentinel. As I packed up, preparing to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The woods seemed to hold their breath, watching, waiting. I glanced back at the clearing one last time, the cabin standing empty, the fire pit cold. I left the mountains behind, but the memory of that night followed me. The footsteps, the sense of being watched, lingered, a shadow that refused to fade. Even now, when the wind rustles the leaves just so, I am reminded of the whispering woods and the unseen presence that lurks within. It was a cold evening when I found myself in the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. My role was simple: to check on the cabin my uncle owned but rarely visited anymore. He had asked me to look in on it while he was away in Europe, citing a need for reassurance that it was still standing and free from the mountain's hungry wildlife. The heater had always been temperamental, and I cursed it as I wrapped my coat tighter around me, feeling the chill in the air that the old furnace failed to chase away. It was a minor irritation, but it made me remember how far I was from warmth and comfort. The cabin creaked gently in the wind, a familiar sound that I'd come to expect from years of visits. But as I settled in, there was a sound, a rustling perhaps, coming from the trees beyond the window. It was not loud, not threatening, but it was out of place, a soft shuffling that seemed to come from something not fully there. The colors of the forest were muted in the dusk, and the sound was absorbed by the growing darkness, leaving behind an unsettling absence rather than a presence. I told myself it was a deer or maybe the wind playing tricks on my ears. The woods were full of life, and I knew well that the mind can conjure specters in the solitude of the wilderness. I turned my attention back to the book I had brought with me, its words a balm against the unknown shapes that danced at the edge of my vision. Yet, the noise came again, without insistence, but with a sort of persistence that gnawed at me. The same soft rustling, the same rhythm like something with purpose but no destination. It was neither closer nor further than before, simply there as if it had always been and would always be. I rose to look through the window, seeing nothing but the black outline of trees against the dimming sky. The sound soothed, almost as if it were a lullaby, though its tune was unknown and out of place. Returning to my chair, I tried to dismiss it with logic. An animal, surely, moving through the brush, or perhaps the wind weaving through the branches with a pattern I could not discern. I warmed my hands around a mug of coffee, its steam mingling with my breath in the frigid air of the cabin. The heater clanked, settling into a silence that was too complete, too perfect. The hours passed, and the cabin's silence grew thick around me, tangible as any blanket. I noticed when the sound ceased altogether, an absence as stark as its presence had been. I waited for its return, knowing it would come but hoping it would not. In its silence, the cabin felt larger, as if it had expanded to accommodate the space the noise had left behind. My heart found a rhythm with the ticking clock on the wall, each tick a reassurance of time's passage even as the night stretched on. It was in this silence that the knock came, gentle, almost polite, at the door. Not a pattern of fear, but an invitation or a question I could not refuse. My hand hesitated on the doorknob, the wood cold beneath my fingers. I opened it to find nothing but the pale stretch of moonlight on the empty porch. The forest beyond was a painting, still and unmoving. I shut the door quickly, securing the latch, feeling the weight of the unanswered question linger in the air. Sleep was elusive that night, my mind replaying the small, quiet events that now seemed to loom large in the darkness. I lay in bed, eyes tracing the lines of the ceiling, listening for that sound, that gentle rustling that would not return. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting with me, complicit in the night's secrets. In the morning, I found the footprints, none too large, none too small, just the shape of something that had moved with purpose through the damp earth around the cabin. They led into the woods, far beyond where I could see, disappearing into the dense tapestry of trees and shadow. I did not follow them. Instead, I packed my things, my mind heavy with the remnants of night and the echoes of sounds half heard. As I left the cabin, locking the door behind me, the trees whispered with the wind, their voices achingly familiar. I knew I would return, drawn back by the obligations of family or the pull of mystery that the mountains held. But something in me had shifted, a small fracture in the solid ground of what I thought I knew. I could no longer see the forest without feeling its presence, patient and waiting. Driving away, I glanced once more at the trees, standing silent and still, the cabin nestled among them. A part of me remained there, listening, waiting for the next knock at the door, the next sound in the night. And I knew, somewhere, somehow, it would come. I was a park ranger assigned to the remote reaches of the Arizona desert, where the land stretched vast and unyielding, like a canvas of sand and scrub. My job was to monitor the wildlife and ensure the safety of any hikers who wandered too far off the beaten path. I was there because they thought I could handle the solitude. They said I had a knack for understanding the rhythms of the wild places. But the radio set in the ranger station was on the fritz again, crackling in and out, and it was a minor but constant irritant. It was late afternoon when I noticed how the wind had stopped. The desert was never silent, not truly. There was always the whisper of sand, the rustle of a stray tumbleweed, the distant call of a hawk. But now, there was an unnatural stillness. The air hung heavy, and the sun seemed a little too bright as it dipped toward the horizon. I shrugged it off as a quirk of the weather, though I found myself listening intently, waiting for the world to right itself, the silence crowding in around me. I told myself it was just a trick of the mind. Long hours and isolation could do funny things to a man. The desert played games, bending the senses, making the eyes and ears question their own validity. I focused on the task at hand, checking the equipment and scanning the horizon for signs of life. The wind would return, I assured myself, just as it always did. As the sun began to fall into twilight, I noticed something peculiar. Out on the horizon, a coyote stood still, silhouetted against the fading light. Coyotes were common here, but this one watched me with an unsettling stillness. I turned away, busying myself with the routine checks, only to find the creature had moved closer, without a sound, yet was not moving anymore. Same gaze, same posture. I felt a chill despite the day's heat, but dismissed it as an unusual curiosity of the animal. I knew I should have radioed in, but the static and intermittent bursts of sound from the malfunctioning device dissuaded me. I was not about to let a faulty machine make me doubt my senses. The coyote was merely curious, I told myself, as they often were. I finished my checks and went inside, leaving the door slightly ajar to let in the cooling evening air. But as night fell, I heard the sound. The faint patter of footsteps on sand, cautious and deliberate. I peered out into the darkness, and there it was, closer now. The coyote sitting with an eerie patience. I walked out, half expecting it to dart away, but it merely watched, and I felt a nameless anxiety stir within me. I stepped back inside, locking the door, the coyote's shadow pressing against my mind. I knew then I should have called for assistance, an unease gnawing at the edges of my reason. Yet pride and a certain stubbornness held me back. I was a man of the wild, and this was my domain. I could not allow myself to be unnerved by a lone animal. But deep inside, I felt the shift. The security of my routine life slipping away like grains of sand through my fingers. The night wore on. The footsteps continued, circling the station, and each time I looked, the coyote was there. Sometimes alone, other times with a companion, their eyes gleaming in the dim light, unblinking and constant. They never approached beyond the edge of the light, and I began to doubt my own perceptions, the weariness of the day settling over me like a shroud. By the time dawn broke, the air was still again, and the coyotes were gone, their tracks the only evidence of their presence. I felt the weight of their gaze long after they had vanished, an invisible stain upon my consciousness. The desert was alive once more, the wind whispering secrets I could not decipher, promising the return of what I could not name. I took to the tasks of the day with a new awareness, my senses heightened, searching for the slightest anomaly. Yet there was nothing, just the vast and barren land stretching toward the horizon, indifferent and eternal. The radio remained stubbornly silent, a testament to my isolation. In the days that followed, I carried the memory of those eyes with me, a quiet dread threading through my thoughts. I had seen the desert for what it was, a landscape unyielding and mysterious, home to shadows that moved in the periphery of night. That chill lingered, persistent as the desert wind, a reminder that something watched from the edges, waiting for the night to fall once more. I never saw the coyotes again, but their absence was as unsettling as their presence had been. The boundaries between man and the wild had blurred, leaving me changed, my nights haunted by the quiet padding of feet and the silent stare that spoke of things beyond understanding. The desert, I realized, was never empty. I was a man out in the desert, having left behind the green fields and gentle hills of my youth. A shepherd, I watched over the scattered flock that was mine to tend. The wind had a bite to it, even in the thick of summer. It seemed the earth itself was made of nothing but grit and loneliness. And perhaps that was what I wanted. The sheep were company enough, their bleating as familiar as the voice of an old friend. I had come here to forget, though forgetting was a luxury I could not afford. Each day was like the last, routine and quiet. Yet, as dusk settled and the horizon swallowed the sun, a sliver of unease slipped in, like a thorn in the mind. The reason I stayed was as much necessity as it was penance. My sister's voice rang in my head. You left because you were too afraid to face it. It was true. I had run from the life I had known, the faces I could no longer bear to see. This night, as the moon rose pale and watchful, I felt it more keenly. The desert was a lonely place to hide from what chased me. The guilt over my sister, gone into the night with naught but her name left behind. She had been my charge, and I had failed her. The wind whispered secrets in a tongue I could never grasp, and the sheep huddled close, uneasy as shadows stretched long and thin. As I made my rounds, counting the flock by touch and sound more than sight, a presence skirted the edge of my vision. Something moved on two legs where there should be none but mine. I told myself it was just the shadow play of moonlight on the sand, yet my heart quickened. Fear prickled at the edges of the wound I bore, and I could almost hear her laughter, chiding me for my cowardice. I paused, listening to the desert breathe, my hand trembling on the crook of my staff. The air seemed to grow heavier, pressing against me with a weight that was not wind. I felt the story of the Skinwalkers, those who wore the guise of beasts to deceive, crawling under my skin. Reason warred with old superstitions, but the air was thick with their whispers. I could not ignore it. The decision curled in my gut like smoke. I could continue as I was, each night a repetition of the last, or confront whatever specter haunted my periphery. I gritted my teeth and moved toward the whispers, a moth to the flame. The truth or madness, I had to know. The sand shifted beneath my boots, and I felt the pull of something ancient in the air. The wind howled, a lonely cry echoing the one lodged in my heart. I stopped at the edge of the flock, where a lone figure stood, the shape of it both human and not. It watched me with eyes that mirrored my own, knowing too much, saying more in silence than words could ever convey. The face was mine, yet twisted, a grotesque parody of who I had been. It held the weight of guilt, of loss, all the things I tried to outrun. The truth mocked me, and I knew I had been seen, understood. The creature stepped forward, and there was a comfort in its unspoken challenge, a reflection of my flaw. It was a mirror held up in the desert night, and I could not look away. I felt the pull of its understanding, the lure of becoming what I feared. It would be so easy to let the Skinwalker take my place, to surrender the burden and join the shadows. But there was a choice, a sliver of light in the encroaching dark. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision press down on me. I could run, could let the desert swallow me whole, become the thing that haunted me. Or I could stand my ground, accept the scar that had shaped me, and face the reflection that bore my name. I breathed in the cold night air, tasting the grit of sand and the salt of unshed tears. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone, the desert stretching endless and silent around me. The sheep stirred, their unease a faint echo now. The night had not changed, but I had. I turned back to the flock, feeling the scar within me as a part of who I was, no longer something to hide from. The silence settled deeper, a companion rather than a threat. The desert stretched before me, vast and indifferent, a landscape of endless possibility. I walked among the sheep, more at peace than I had been in years. The night sky was a blanket of stars, And I knew I would carry the memory of that face, the choices made, wherever I went. The reflection lingered, a promise of change, a reminder that the shadows were not just a place to hide, but a place to confront the truest self. As dawn broke, I felt the pull of the land less keenly, the scar a softer ache. I faced the rising sun, knowing the desert had not claimed me. Not yet. I found myself in the high desert, where the wind seemed as ancient and bitter as the stones scattered across the land. I was a guide, or at least I pretended to be, leading a group of city folk through the scrubland, my pockets heavier with their money than with any real knowledge of the region. I had come here, far from the memories I could neither confront nor abandon, to forget the war and the men I had left behind. The desert was my refuge, a place where I could hide from the past, burying it under layers of dust and pretense. The group was an irritation, asking questions about the land and its stories, questions for which I had no honest answers. I guided them with vague tales and half-truths, my voice steady, even as my heart held the weight of my cowardice. A fear that I would never escape the ghosts that followed me, the guilt that gnawed at my insides like a feral thing. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky with hues of crimson and indigo, a shrill cry pierced the air. It was a sound that did not belong to any creature I knew, an anguished wail that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth itself. It stopped the group in their tracks, eyes wide with fear and wonder, while my body tensed, my instincts screaming to run. But there was nowhere to go, no command to follow, only the oppressive weight of the desert night pressing down around us. I told myself it was the wind twisting through the canyons, yet the cry resonated with the guilt I carried, a reminder of the screams I had long tried to forget. The others looked to me, their guide, for reassurance, and I gave it to them, though my words felt hollow and unconvincing even as they left my lips. As darkness fell, the chill of the night seeped into our camp. The shadows grew longer, and I felt their eyes upon me, their trust misplaced, their questions unanswered. I tried to shake the feeling, to tell myself that it was merely fatigue and nerves, but the unease crept under my skin. The desert seemed alive, each sound amplified, a whisper in the void, a taunt in the blackness. I debated with myself, a battle that raged within, between the need to protect my charges and the urge to flee from whatever lurked beyond the firelight. The night was relentless, offering no respite, and I knew I had to act, to prove to myself that I was not the coward I feared I had become. I rose from my place by the fire, the only source of warmth and security, and stepped into the night, driven by a compulsion to confront whatever waited out there. The desert air was sharp, biting through my resolve, but I walked on, away from the safety of the group, alone with my thoughts and the darkness. It was then that I saw it, a shape moving with unnatural grace among the rocks, a reflection of my own silhouette. It mimicked my movements, as if mocking me, taunting me with my own cowardice. I felt exposed, as though my very soul was laid bare before it, my flaws and fears reflected back at me. The realization struck like a blow, the truth undeniable. The desert had revealed my lie, the facade I had constructed around my guilt and fear. The creature, whatever it was, knew me, understood the depths of my weakness, and it was relentless in its pursuit. I stumbled back toward the camp, but the night was unforgiving. The creature closed in, its presence suffocating, exploiting my every hesitation, every doubt. I could feel the weight of its gaze, the pressure of its expectation, and I knew I had to choose. In the end, I could not run, could not hide from the truth any longer. I faced it, the desert and its manifestation of my guilt, accepting that there was no escape from the past, only the confrontation of it. I turned to meet the creature, to offer myself to it, hoping for redemption, or perhaps release. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, I stood there, alone, the campfire a distant memory. The creature was gone, but its mark remained, etched into my very being. The desert had stripped me bare, left me with nothing but the truth I had long avoided. The scars of that night would stay with me, a reminder of the battle within, a reflection of who I truly was, and a symbol of the choice I finally made. The wind whispered through the canyons, carrying with it the echoes of the night, and I understood that I would forever be bound to this place, a part of the desert's story, and it a part of mine. The night was thick with the stench of juniper and sagebrush, the air cool upon my cheeks as I sat beside the dying campfire. I had no business being there, but duty has its own call, and I had to watch over the sheep in the valley that night. The wind carried whispers, and the moon hung low, round and bloated like the eye of a blind old man. The sheep bleated in the distance, restless, perhaps sensing what I could not. I struck a match, cursing as the flame extinguished almost immediately. The pack of matches was damp, and I felt the irritation needle at me, though it was no one's fault but mine. My own neglect, my own lack of care. Just like with her, I thought, pushing the memory away. Memories were like that, insistent, sharp as broken glass, but I had learned well how to ignore the pain. What was past, I would tell myself. Move on. There it was again, that distant rustle, the sound of something moving through the brush. I stiffened, listening. My mind whispered of the stories, the old tales of creatures that wore the skins of men, of beasts that stalked the night. But they were just stories, I thought, told around fires to make the young ones shiver. Then the sound came again, closer now, a footfall in the dark. The fire cast long shadows, and the hairs on my neck bristled. I felt the old guilt stir within me, the guilt of things done and left undone, and I wondered if this was some punishment deserved. I got up, forcing myself to move toward the noise. "Who's there?" I called, my voice too loud, a jarring intrusion against the quiet of the night. Silence was my only answer, but the silence was heavy, watchful. I shook my head, trying to dispel the feeling, the sense that something was off. The sheep shifted again, a low murmur of unease passing through the flock, and I felt my breath quicken. Was it an animal? A coyote, maybe? I knew I was jumping at shadows, but the unease was like a cruel hand, squeezing tight. I told myself to dismiss it. There was no need for fear here. Yet the night seemed to press inward, a weight on my chest. I turned back to the fire, the warmth licking at my skin, offering comfort, offering distraction. But behind me, the sounds continued, a deliberate shuffle through the underbrush. I knew then I had to act, to confront whatever it was. The fear was a coward's fear, and I'd had enough of it. I grabbed the flashlight from my pack, its beam cutting a path through the dark as I moved away from the fire's reach. The beam fell upon a shape, and my heart stuttered. The figure stood there, watching me, wearing my face. It was an imitation, a crude mockery, as if it had only just learned how to be me. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I was frozen, caught between two worlds, the rational world I knew and the one that now stood before me. The thing moved, shifting its weight, eyes glinting with a knowing malice. The horror of it cut through me, a keen blade of realization that this thing sought to replace me. I felt the lie I lived with, the detachment I cloaked myself in, reflected in that gaze. It knew me, knew the scar beneath the skin, the wound I tried so hard to hide. I stumbled backward, the flashlight flickering, and I knew I must choose. I could not run, could not hide from this. I had to confront it, to face the thing I could not bear to face within myself. The figure moved toward me, steps deliberate, and I raised the flashlight higher. "What do you want?" I asked, voice steady now, though terror gnawed at my insides. It tilted its head, a gesture eerily familiar, and I understood. It wanted everything I was, everything I pretended to be. I had to defend it, to hold on to whatever sliver of self I had left, even if it meant embracing the flaw I had long denied. I lunged, throwing myself at the creature with a desperation born of necessity, the flashlight clattering to the ground. We grappled, and I felt its skin beneath my hands, cool and unyielding. It was stronger, but I fought with a fervor I did not know I possessed, born from a place deep within. In the struggle, I felt something shift, a loosening within me, and the creature hesitated. I pressed the advantage, forcing it back, until finally it broke away, retreating into the shadows from whence it came. The night was silent once more, and I stood alone, breath heaving, the fire now just embers at my back. I looked down at my hands, trembling but my own, and I knew I had changed. The fear was still there, the guilt unyielding, but I was willing to face it now. The scar of the encounter lingered, a reminder etched deep, but it was not one I would shy away from any longer. The valley lay quiet, the sheep returning to their calm, and I felt a strange peace settle upon me. The night, though dark, was mine again, and I was ready to walk its paths, whatever shadows might come.